Welcome into our Packers News Chat alongside Jim Ozarski. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers began their first regular season practice right behind us on Ray Nitschke Field today. However, there were a couple very important faces that were not present due to injury. We'll give you all of the latest from practice in just a moment. Before we begin, I want to remind you, as always, we want to hear from you. Give us your questions, your thoughts, anything on your mind over on Facebook. Leave them in the chat, and Jim and I will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. Rookie inside linebacker Kamal Martin is going to miss at least a few weeks with a reported knee injury. He sustained an injury, according to our Ryan Wood over on Packers News, during the Sunday's scrimmage at Lambeau Field. Martin was slated to make at least some sort of impact on the defense. He was able to get some reps during training camp alongside inside linebacker Christian Kirksey. Jim, how are the Packers going to address filling the depth chart with Kamal Martin's loss?
Yeah, it's, they're kind of back to where they were before they drafted him, which is seeing if Oren Burks is going to be healthy and able to put together consistent practices in order to be on the field, and that was until Martin was drafted, and until he had proven to the coaches that he could play next to Christian Kirksey in the base defense. It was kind of Burks' job. And let's be honest, as it went on, they flipped. Martin took that spot. Oren Burks did return to practice. He had missed the last couple with an undisclosed ailment. We'll see as the weeks go on, if he gets into pads and actually does all of the work, I guess. He was on the field. That's again, they're hoping for improvement from a guy that they've been waiting on that for a few years now.
As you mentioned, Jim, Burks returned to the practice field after missing the last several practices, including Sunday's scrimmage at Lambeau Field. Burks has been vying for that second inside linebacker spot with Kamal Martin all throughout training camp. He's been vying for that spot for quite some time now. Last season, back in 2019, in the preseason, he sustained a pectoral injury that had him sidelined for the majority of the regular season. Jim, how likely is it that Burks is able to make an impact on this defense?
It's a believe it when you see it type of answer, Olivia. I think, he was surpassed by a rookie in practice in this little 2-week training camp period. I don't really know what else to say other than that. And then whatever this ailment was, with him coming back, maybe it was just a soft tissue deal or whatever. So it's hard to say, but he's going to have the opportunity now because Kamal Martin, whatever those snaps were going to be, they're open now, over the next, first half of this regular season. So Burks, he's going to have a shot, and then it's, Ty Summers, and then maybe, however they got to work things, the other undrafted inside linebacker, Chris Barnes. That inside linebacker room, Olivia, kind of thin, and Curtis Bolton is still not yet off the PUP list, and with roster configurations happening by this weekend, I don't know how fair it would be, or A, if he's physically ready, and B, if he is, to just sort of make him active 2 days before cuts. And really then you'd have to just cut him. So they've got some depth issues right now at inside linebacker.
The window of opportunity is as open as it's ever been at inside linebacker, with Oren Burks, Ty Summers, even Chris Barnes vying for that second inside linebacker spot. Kamal Martin isn't the only injury that the Packers are dealing with right now. In addition, right tackle Billy Turner is also reported to have a knee injury, and he will also be missing several weeks of the season. Turner has been competing with right tackle Rick Wagner for that starting tackle spot. Now it looks like Rick Wagner may just be the favorite. Jim, how confident are the Packers in Rick Wagner that he can go out and start week 1?
Yeah, they've got to be confident now. And honestly, good news for Wagner and the Packers that, that left elbow injury suffered a few weeks ago. Looks like at least he can practice with it. He's come back. He's had the brace on. And look, he's a tough guy, to be honest. He's not just being a Wisconsin guy, but he played through some stuff in Detroit and in Baltimore. So they're going to have to be confident. And in terms of the competition there with Turner and Wagner, it felt like because Wagner was out, it was Turner's job. I don't think anybody's loses a job due to injury. I guess we'll see, but yeah, it's definitely a setback for this offensive line.
Another challenge along the offensive line as it comes to injury. Wagner, as you mentioned, Jim, did deal with a left elbow injury during camp. He returned on Friday after missing just about a week of training camp. Behind Wagner, the depth at tackle is a little bit concerning as far as having some strong NFL experienced talent. Some of the depth at tackle includes Alex Light, Yosh Nijman, and John LeGlue. Jim, how concerned are the Packers about depth at the tackle position?
Yeah, well, I'll preface it by saying every team is concerned about their depth at tackle. There are not 64 great tackles when they're all healthy and playing anyway on Sundays, Olivia. And what does that mean? That means usually tackles 3 through 5 on each team are usually projects or, veterans that are maybe plug and play for a little bit. It's a tough spot in this league, to be honest. It's like starting pitching in baseball. There just aren't that many of them, and there are even fewer good ones. So they say they like Alex Light. He's got the advantage because he's been on the team for a few years. He's spelled Brian Balaga last year at times. He has spelled David Bakhtiari. Hasn't always gone great, but they at least know who he is. Yosh Nijman and John LeGlue are guys who, Nijman, they really like him physically and the things he can do, but he, practice squad, and then an IR injury late in the year sent him back. He just came back to practice. And John LeGlue, late season addition to the practice squad, again, kind of a project. He came in December, so he had, a month of practice, and then these couple weeks. So, we're talking about really raw players. So I think that they would tell you they like what they can do from an athletic standpoint, but if they had to go out and protect Aaron Rodgers on the right and the left, yeah, there might be some concern there.
A few question marks there along the right side of the offensive line as we approach Saturday's cutdowns. They are rapidly approaching, and next week is week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. We'll have a lot more answers as we get closer to next week as far as the depth chart is concerned. Let's move over to our lovely Facebook viewers. If you're over on Facebook, hello, it's nice to see you. If you have a question, let us know. Our conversation that we've been having leads pretty nicely into a question from Southwest Florida Packers fan club. They ask, at right tackle, who is on speed dial right now? Jim, we've had this discussion on our live stream over the past several weeks about the potential that the Packers might bring back a familiar face in veteran tackle Jared Veldheer. They brought Veldheer late in the season into the Packers locker room, and he was able to make an immediate impact as a starter in spelling Brian Balaga in a couple periods late in the regular season. How likely is it that the Packers would be interested in bringing back someone like Veldheer, who is still a free agent?
Yeah, I think at this point, it would have to be another injury to Rick Wagner while Billy Turner is also hurt, to me, because, look, we're 2 days from cuts, and Jared Veldheer's phone, at least from the Green Bay side, has not rang. He wasn't signed. Rick Wagner was the guy they brought in, as the free agent tackle. When Wagner got hurt, now granted, obviously the Packers athletics training staff said, hey, he'll be back. So I don't know if there is one on speed dial, Olivia, to be honest. I think it's one of those where they're just going to roll with what they've got till they feel that's not good enough. And at least for now. And also, with cuts and whatnot coming out, for instance, a guy like an Adam Pankey who bounced around on some practice squads, left Green Bay a couple times. Let's say a guy like that is waived or cut this weekend, the Packers may claim him. So I think when it comes to like a veteran, it's more of a wait and see, kind of like what Veldheer was last year. Whereas now they'd rather kind of focus on the younger guys, and maybe someone around the league that they like might get cut from another team.
Wait and see if someone who's out there who's had experience in this offense is available to the Packers. We'll see exactly if they decide to steal anyone off of waivers as we get closer to Saturday's deadline. Let's move on to Steve. Steve asks, which player will be used as a fullback? That's a good question, Steve. I think we've talked pretty much a lot about H-back/tight end Josiah DeGuara and his versatility, his ability to line up all over the formation for this Packers offense. Jim, how likely is it that the Packers look to DeGuara for being that fullback type of position?
Yeah, it would make sense. You know, John Lovett, I guess, is listed as a fullback. I don't know, man, when I go through the roster, I don't know if I see a spot for him yet. I could see why he was an intriguing waiver claim, you know, from the Packers, but I don't know if he's one of their best, 25, 26 offensive players, in order to make the team. So, yeah, I don't know if he doesn't make it, then, yeah, I think you're going to see a DeGuara. I thought we seen Jay Sternberger line up sort of in front of those running backs last year when he became active. So without a Lovett type, yeah, I think you are going to see the tight ends back there for sure.
Matt LaFleur has spoken very highly of DeGuara's versatility ever since he was drafted. Now it's just a matter of whether or not he can allow that versatility to translate at the NFL level. We've only seen it so far in training camp. We'll see if it translates come week 1. Let's move over to Walter. Walter asks, I hear Lane Taylor is having a good training camp. Could he possibly earn a starting position? Jim, we've seen Lane Taylor working in at right guard when Billy Turner is working in at right tackle. Now that Billy Turner is out of the picture, at least for the first however many weeks of the regular season, Turner potentially had that opportunity there to be the starting right tackle. Formerly, last year, he was the starting right guard. Now that right guard position is more or less up for grabs, how likely is it that it's Lane Taylor's?
Yeah, I mean, of the three guys, I guess, competing for 2 spots, I mean, Lane Taylor's been the best of the 3. He looks, our colleagues Tom Silverstein and Pete Doherty say that he looks like the guy they saw playing left guard a couple years ago. And it's easy to forget last year, he was coming off a foot injury and was still sort of in that rehab process. And then he gets hurt and misses the year with the bicep. So I think he's just totally physically ready for the first time in a few years. So, yeah, no, he looks good. I think, if Lane Taylor's not your starting right guard in Minnesota, then something happened in practice again. You hate to say it. So, yeah, I think Lane Taylor's going to be that guy. And, if Turner's going to be out, it's going to be Rick Wagner. And then we'll just see, if those two can find a cohesion. And maybe no fans in Minneapolis will help those guys as they, try to figure out snap counts and get some chemistry.
I'm eager to see exactly what it's going to sound like inside of the stadium. It's definitely not going to be anything like it typically is when they have fans present. However, we got a little bit of a taste of what that crowd noise is going to look like when we were inside of Lambeau Field for Packers practice. Let me tell you, kind of annoying, kind of loud, not exactly pleasant.
So I asked some of our photographer colleagues who are on the field. So like up in the press box, it can get kind of muted. We're behind this glass and we're up real high. And so photographers are on the field and they've all said that this piped in noise, Olivia, is way louder than real noise. So I don't know what that's about, and I guess we'll find out what the league settles on it here soon.
And we'll hear it too in Minneapolis. That's an open air press box. So there will be no escaping the crowd noise, even if it is artificial, come week 1. Let's take another question here from Steve. Steve asks, with the roster being cut on Saturday, how many wide receivers do you project will be kept on the Packers roster? It's a good question. In the past,
Very
the
good.
Packers, I believe last year they kept, 6 wide receivers on the initial 53. Going into this year, it's a little more challenging for some of the wide receivers, especially some of the less experienced, undrafted players, or someone like a Reggie Begelton who played in the CFL. It's been more difficult for those players to come in and have an opportunity to play with Aaron Rodgers or to build any sort of development relationship with him, simply because there haven't been any preseason games. Jim, with that in mind, How many wide receivers do you anticipate making this initial 53?
Wow. My gut says it's only going to be 5. I just think with the handful of running backs, the handful of tight ends, and maybe I can hedge it a little bit by saying we might see a situation like last year where Allen Lazard was cut because they had to get Jay Sternberger through to put him on IR. They're going to have to do that with Kamal Martin if they decide he's an IR guy. Obviously, they'd probably replace him with a defensive player, but that's the point. Like, they might cut a guy or two that they hope to just bring back the next week. But, yeah, I think it's 5. I mean, Rodgers said today, Olivia, that he really hasn't connected with anyone new. Tom Silverstein mentioned, like, there was Geronimo Allison back in his rookie year. There was a Jake Kumaro, and then there was an Allen Lazard. There was always kind of a guy that seemed to click with the starting quarterback. And even Rodgers said it didn't happen. And not that it's anybody's fault, but I think that's what makes this decision a little harder. They might end up just going with 5 guys they know and then having 3 or 4 different receivers on the practice squad.
Yep, we're getting a lot of questions about the receivers. John specifically wants to know who we think will make it. So who are those 5 that you anticipate making the initial 53?
Yeah, I mean, the first 3 are easy, which is Devontae Adams, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Allen Lazard. After that, it's Jay Kumerow has obviously got to step up. He does have that relationship and obviously a special teams value. So there's 4. And then after that, it's Malik Taylor, Reggie Begelton, Equinemius St. Brown. I mean, they're all kind of in that same boat. So it's a toss-up. I mean, I think if there was a surprise, it would be Taylor, undrafted 2 years ago or last year, but his second year in the system. So, Darius Shepard's in there. I shouldn't forget him. I mean, he made the team a year ago. I think, those other guys are bigger, maybe a little faster, can do other things on special teams other than just return. So I don't know who that 5th is, but that's the pool. So really, I think it just comes down to those little things that only Matt LaFleur, Jason Vrabel, and Brian Gutekunst know, right? Those fine lines of those practice tapes because honestly, Olivia, I mean, have any of those guys wowed you at all to the point where you're like, that's the 5th guy? I don't know. Not to me.
Certainly no one has stood out. On top of that, wide receiver Equinemius St. Brown missed several practices with some sort of undisclosed injury. He returned to practice today. However, I saw him walk off with the trainer at the last minute that we were allowed to be viewing practice toward the end of special teams, which means who knows what. It could mean nothing. It could mean that he came back later and he resumed practicing.
Right. Or he gave it a go and it whatever it was flared up again.
Right. Or it can mean something more serious. We just don't know. We'll see tomorrow if he's back at practice, participating in a somewhat full capacity. We don't know, but it's not a good sign that he's been missing practices after having missed all of last season. So something to keep an eye on. Let's move over to the defensive backs. Let's talk to Michael here. Michael asks, does Josh Jackson finally look ready? Josh Jackson, a draft pick back in 2018, has remained pretty low down on the depth chart. Both Jair Alexander, Kevin King have springboarded over him, and so has even a Chandon Sullivan, who is likely to be the starting slot corner this upcoming season. Where does Josh Jackson stand right now on this depth chart?
Yeah, he's kind of in that Oren Burks territory, Olivia. I mean, he just hasn't. I mean, first of all, there's some starters there that he's just not going to overtake if they're healthy, and they are. And so really I think the question is does the team feel he can be, the next man up if a King and an Alexander get hurt? Can he be a boundary corner, that won't give up big plays, that'll be a sure tackler? I mean, interceptions and playing the ball are kind of lower on the list at this point for a guy who's had a hard time getting on the field. So, ready for what, I guess. It's more of, the roles back there are pretty defined. So he didn't overtake any of that. And so really the question is, do they feel he has hit a level that makes him a better fit for the team than, say, a Stanford Samuels III or a Kadar Holman or a Deshaun Amos, the other Canadian player they signed. You know, that's the balance now. Is Josh Jackson in his fourth year better than one of these other younger players? You know, that I think that's a determination Brian Gutekunst and Jerry Gray and Mike Pettin have to make.
Definitely a challenge. He's had some very strong performances in training camp, and then he's also had some not so strong performances.
Which for a year four, that's a balance. Like, you would make sense. That makes sense from an undrafted rookie. This guy's going into year 4. So that's where, if you're going to have uneven play, do you just go with the younger guy at that point? I don't know. We'll see.
Could be the end of the road if he's not able to step up within the next few days. We'll see exactly what the future has in store for Josh Jackson. Let's move over to Timmy. Timmy asks, how about Jonathan Garvin, outside linebacker? What can he bring to defensive coordinator Mike Pettin's defense? Garvin was a late pick in this year's draft. He and a few of the other outside linebackers, including last year's waiver claim and Tim Williams, they have been getting around the quarterback a little bit during this training camp. How likely is it that Garvin is able to make an impact on this defense in 2020?
Yeah, if it's up to the Packers, they would prefer to say no shot at that, because that would mean the Smiths and Rashawn Gary are healthy. And look, I'll give Mike Smith, outside linebackers coach, and Jonathan Garvin a lot of credit here, Olivia. I mean, that whole outside linebacker room, as you said, I would say has probably been the strongest group of camp when it comes to pass rush. Specifically, I think Garvin, Randy Ramsey before he got hurt, Tipa Galea, they've all been really good. You know, so it's just a numbers game. Last year they only kept 4. And right now it feels like the Smiths, Gary, and Tim Williams would be the Fackrell replacement. The fourth-year guy who they would hope can drop into coverage and run and move. Whereas those, like a Garvin, I don't know if his game is there yet outside. It could be. At some point, they got to push these guys along and trust them to read coverages. So he's about. It depends. If they're going to keep 5, it's between him and Galea. Maybe they keep him because he was drafted, meaning Garvin. But I guess I wouldn't be surprised if one of them make it or they both go to practice squad. But it's not an indictment on the way they played. I think it would just be a numbers game. That
16-man practice squad is going to be an important pool of players for the Packers in this COVID-19 era that we're all living in. They'll have that pool at their dispense if they need someone to call somebody up to the active roster. That is going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for all of your lovely, thoughtful questions. We will be back tomorrow, so if you did not get your question answered today, bring it again tomorrow, and we will do our best to address it then. For Jim, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.